In the fall of 1948, Andy met me one morning in the exercise yard and asked me if I could get him half a dozen rock blankets. "What the hell are those?" I asked. He told me that was just what rockhounds called them. They were polishing cloths about the size of dish towels. They were heavily padded with a smooth side and a rough side. The smooth side like fine-grained sandpaper. The rough side almost as abrasive as industrial steel wool. And he also kept a box of that in his cell, although he didn't get it from me. I imagine he kited it from the prison laundry.
I told him I thought we could do business on those, and I ended up getting them for a very same rock and gem shop. Oh, from the very same rock and gem shop where I'd arranged to get the rock hammer. This time I charged Andy my usual 10% and not a penny more. I didn't see anything lethal or even dangerous in a dozen 7x7 squares of padded cloth, rock blankets indeed.
It was about 5 months later that Andy asked if I could get him Rita Hayworth. That conversation took place in the auditorium during a movie show. Nowadays, we get the movie shows once or twice a week, but back then, the shows were a monthly event. Usually the movies we got had a morally uplifting message to them, and this one, The Lost Weekend, was no different. The moral was that it's dangerous to drink. It was a moral we could take some comfort in.
Andy maneuvered to get next to me, and about halfway through the show, he leaned a little closer and asked if I could get him Rita Hayworth. I tell you the truth, it kind of tickled me. He was usually cold and calm and collected, but that night he was jumpy as hell, almost embarrassed, as if he was asking me to get him a load of Trojans. One of those sheepskin lined gadgets that are supposed to enhance your solitary pleasure. As the magazines put in, he seemed overcharged, a man of the verge of blowing his radiator.
"I can get her," I said. "No sweat. Calm down. You want the big one or the little one?" At that time, Rita was my best girl. A few years before, it had been Betty Grable. And she came in 2 sizes. For $1 you could get the little Rita. $2.50 you could get the big Rita, 4 feet high and all woman. "The big one," he said, not looking at me. I tell you, he was a hot sketch that night. He was blushing just like a kid trying to get into a coot show with his big brother's draft card. "Can you do it?"
Take it easy. Sure I can. Does it bear shit in the woods? The audience was applauding and catcalling as the bugs came out of the walls to get Ray Millen, who was having a bad case of the DTs.
"How soon?" "A week, maybe less." "Okay." But he sounded disappointed, as if he had been hoping I had one stuffed down my pants right then. "How much?" I quoted him the wholesale price. I could afford to give him this one at cost. He'd been a good customer, what with his rock hammer and his rock blankets. Furthermore, he'd been a good boy more than one night when he was having his problems with Boggs the rooster, and the rest. I wondered how long it would be before he used the rock hammer to crack someone's head open.
Posters are a big part of my business, just behind the booze and cigarettes, usually half a step ahead of the reefer. In the 60s, the business exploded in every direction, with a lot of people wanting funky hang-ups like Jimi Hendrix, Bob Dylan, and that Easy Rider poster, but mostly it's girls, one pin-up queen after another.
A few days after Andy spoke to me, a laundry driver I did business with back then brought in better than 60 posters, most of them Rita Hayworth's. You may even remember the picture, sure do. Rita is dressed in a bathing suit, one hand behind her head, her eyes half closed, those full, sulky red lips parted. They called it Rita Hayworth, but they might as well have called it Woman in Heat.
The prison administration knows about the black market, in case you were wondering. Sure they do. They probably almost much about my business as I do myself. They live with it because they know that a prison is like a big pressure cooker, and there has been vents somewhere to let off steam. They make the occasion bust, and I've done time in solitary a time or 3 over the year, but when it's something like posters, they wink live and let live. And when a big Rita Hayworth went up in someone's fishy cell, the assumption was that it came in the mail from a friend or a relative. Of course, the care packages from the friends and relatives are opened and the contents inventory. But who goes back and rechecks the inventory sheets for something as harmless as a Rita Hayworth or Ava Gardner pinup? When you're in a pressure cooker, you learn to live and let live, or somebody will carve you a brand new mouth just above the Adam's apple. You learn to make allowances.
It was Ernie again who took the poster up to Andy's cell, 14 for my own 6. And it was Ernie who brought it back, the note written in Andy's careful hand, just one word, thanks. A little while later, as they filed us out for the morning chow, I glanced into his cell and saw Rita over his bunk in all her swimsuited glory, one hand behind her head, her eyes half closed, those soft, satiny lips parted. It was over his bunk where he could look at her nights after lights out and the glow of the arc sodium lights in the exercise yard. But in the bright morning sunlight, there were dark slashes across her face, the shadow of the bars on the single slit window.
Now I'm going to tell you what happened in mid-May of 1950 that finally ended Andy's 3-year series of skirmish with the sisters. It was also the incident which eventually got him out of the laundry and into the library, where he filled out his work time until he left our happy little family earlier this year.
You may have noticed how much of what I've told you already is hearsay. Someone saw something and told me and I told you. Well, in some cases, I've simplified it even more than it really was and have repeated, or will repeat, fourth or fifth-hand information. That's the way it is here. The grapevine is very real, and you have to use it if you're going to stay ahead. Also, of course, you have to know how to pick out the grains of truth from the chaff of lies, rumors, and wish-it-had-beens.
You may also have gotten the idea that I'm describing someone who's more legend than a man, and I would have to agree, and there's some truth to that. To us long-timers who knew Andy over the space of years, there was an element of fantasy to him, a sense of almost a myth magic. If you get what I mean, that story I passed him about Andy refusing to give Boggs Diamond a head job, it was part of that myth, and how he kept on fighting sisters is part of it, and how he got the library job too is part of it too. But with one important difference, I was there and I saw what happened, and I swear on my mother's name that it was all true. The oath of the convicted murderer may not be worth much, but believe this, I don't lie.
Andy and I were on fair speaking terms by then. The guy fascinated me. Looking back to the poster episode, I see there's one thing I neglected to tell you, and maybe I should. 5 weeks after he hung Rita up, I'd forgotten all about it by then, and had gone on to other deals. Ernie passed a small white box through the bars of my cell. "From Dufresne," he said low, and never missed a stroke with his push broom. "Thanks, Ernie," I said, and slipped him half a pack of Camels. Now, what the hell was this? I was wondering as I slipped the cover from the box. There was a lot of white cotton inside, and below that, I looked for a long time. For a few minutes, it was like I didn't even dare touch them. They were so pretty. There's a crying shortage of pretty things in the slam, and the real pity of it is that a lot of men don't even seem to miss them.